I woke up. And when I woke up, I found myself standing on some gray rocks overlooking the Potomac River. Everywhere I looked, there were lots and lots of gray rocks. But as I looked across the river, some of the rocks seemed to be moving, and some of the rocks seemed to have white heads. I wondered, what were these moving white-headed rocks? So I took out my binoculars to get a closer look. And that's when I realized those weren't moving rocks with big heads. Those were great big birds. And as I scanned a few of the rocks, I realized there weren't just a couple of those great big birds. There were many, many birds. Since most of the birds were on the other side of the river, it was a little bit difficult to tell how big they were. They seemed pretty large, but
all I could know for sure was that these were birds.
As I was now able to get a closer look, now I realized that the birds had long legs and a long beak.
I really wanted to know what these birds were, but I didn't know their name. So I started thinking about what were some of the birds I had seen before that were similar to these, and what were some of the birds that I had seen before in similar places to where I was seeing these birds.
So I found my favorite bird book to help me know what were these birds. And as I flipped through the pages, I started to remember some similar birds that I had seen before. Over the summer at the beach, I remember seeing these little birds called sanderlings run back and forth by the waves. They had kind of long legs compared to the rest of their body, and they seemed to hunt food with their beaks. But the sanderlings were much, much smaller than the larger birds I was looking at on the side of the river. Along the rocks by the beach, I also saw a bird. These birds looked a little different than the birds on the rocks by the river, but they were doing similar things with their beak, hunting for food, although these were insects and crabs, walking along the river, and I wonder, if they stood in the water, would they be able to hunt for fish with that beak? While the ruddy turnstone did some similar things and lived in a similar place compared to the birds by the river, I think the ruddy turnstone was a different bird. Whimbrels with curved beaks and willets with straight beaks also have long legs and seem to hunt for animals to eat by the shore. But as cool as the willets and whimbrels are, they are not as tall as the birds I saw hunting and fishing along the Potomac River. So as I kept going back in time in my mind, I started to get a little concerned I wasn't remembering anything that looked like the birds I was seeing now. Thankfully, my luck seemed to change, and I was starting to get closer to figuring out what the bird was. I remembered one time I saw a green heron hunting fish by the canal near the Potomac. I remember several times seeing the black-crowned night heron in the same place that I was seeing these bigger birds, but the black-crowned night heron looked more like a green heron than it did like the birds I was seeing now. I remembered a white bird. This snowy egret also had long legs to stand in the water, and it also ate fish. Unfortunately, it was a little smaller than the bird I was looking at by the river, and its beak, feathers, and legs were all the wrong color. The white ibis had long legs and a long beak like the bird I was looking at by the river, but its feathers were the wrong color, and its beak was curved while the bird by the river had a straight beak. The little blue heron looked a lot like the birds I was seeing. But as I looked closely, its feathers were a little too dark, and its body was a little too short. The great egret looked almost the same. It even had that same curved neck and orange beak. And the tri-colored heron looked really, really similar. As much as I wish the birds I was looking at looked like this bare-throated tiger heron, even though their bodies were the right shape, the birds I was looking at were not nearly as colorful. It seemed we were getting pretty close, And if this gray heron weren't only found in Africa, I would have been pretty sure that there were gray herons on the side of the Potomac River. So after much reading, remembering, and comparing, I finally figured it out. Those birds are great blue herons. While the book was really helpful to figure out what they were, the best way to learn about great blue herons was to watch them. And while I was watching them on the rapids part of the river, great blue herons can be found almost anywhere there's water, and especially when that water has fish. But the first thing I noticed was that great blue herons are birds. And as they are birds, great blue herons have feathers. And while those feathers may help them fly a little bit, what the feathers really do is keep them warm. While they're easier to see in the springtime, great blue herons are a bird that we can see almost all year long.
Not only are great blue herons really good at flying, they're also really good at hiding.
Great blue herons are really good at hiding because their feathers match the color of the rocks and they match the color of the water. And since great blue herons are predators, their hiding makes it easier for them to hunt for fish. From far away, you might not see any great blue herons here, but if you look a little more closely, how many do you see? While great blue herons are really good at hiding, there are lots of animals that are really good at hiding.
Not only does being a good hider make it harder for you and for me to find great blue herons, being good hiders makes great blue herons better hunters.
By spending time on the river watching them hunt, we can learn how they hunt, and we can see how good they are at hunting. Great blue herons are so good at hunting that scientists call them specialized hunters. But what makes a great blue heron a specialized hunter?
Great blue herons are specialized hunters because they have really, really long legs and they have a really, really long beak.
The long legs let them walk to hunt in deep water, and the sharp beak acts like a spear. But even though their bodies have adapted to be specialized hunters, hunting can still be difficult. They still need to find a good spot to hunt, and they still need to defend that spot from other great blue herons. To be good at fishing, a great blue heron needs to be patient, fast, have good balance, and be willing to try over and over again. And even if they're lucky enough to catch a fish, getting the fish to shore can be quite difficult. But every so often, and hopefully often enough that the bird can survive, a great blue heron will catch a fish and be able to get it to shore so it can eat it. And even when they get to shore, the challenge is not over. They still have to figure out how to get a big fish down that long, narrow neck of theirs. It usually takes a long time, and sometimes they're successful, and other times there's other birds that have different ideas. If they don't swallow the fish fast enough, there's always another predator who would be happy to take the fish home to its family. As the day moves on, herons that have caught fish fly back to their nests to feed their babies. Great blue herons often build their nests in large groups of many other great blue herons. And sometimes the group of heron nests have other birds nesting nearby. Here near Great Falls, there are many, many heron nests and many, many cormorant nests.
And while having lots of other birds around provides protection, having lots of other birds around attracts bird predators like bald eagles. And those bald eagles are looking at those herons, thinking the baby herons or the eggs might be food for the baby bald eagles.
Every morning, the birds fly to the river to hunt food, and every evening they come back to the nest to feed their babies. And that, my friend, is the story of the huge hidden hunters living along the Potomac River. So, my friends, I hope you enjoyed our exploration of the moving white rocks along the Potomac River. With their white heads and gray backs, these rocks are very camouflaged. And if you look really carefully, you might see that those rocks aren't rocks at all, but they are in fact the great blue herons, one of the largest birds in our area and one of the coolest birds to watch, learn about, and wonder about. By observing them, we can see how well they hide. We can see how their long legs, sharp beak, and twisty neck are all adapted to hunting. We can see how they defend their territory, and see how they take care of their babies. There's so much about them that we can learn. I hope you enjoyed our exploration of the great blue heron.
See you next time on another adventure, exploring nature and learning about science.
Hope to see you next time for another adventure. Bye-bye.